In the small, peaceful village of Blackridge, life moved slowly. Everyone knew each other by name, and nothing unusual ever seemed to happen. People left their doors unlocked, children played freely in the streets, and neighbors trusted one another without question. Mary Ann Ansell lived quietly at the very edge of this village. Her small cottage stood near the woods, slightly hidden from view, as if it didn't quite belong with the rest of the homes. She worked at the local tailor shop, where she spent her days stitching clothes in silence. She was polite when spoken to, always offering a soft smile, but she never started conversations. Most people barely noticed her presence. To the villagers, Mary Ann was harmless, forgettable. But there was one thing about her that stood out. Every single evening, just as the sun began to set, Mary Ann would leave her cottage and walk toward the woods. It didn't matter if it was raining, cold, or dark, she never missed a day. Some villagers found it strange, but no one questioned her directly. When someone once asked why she went there so often, she simply replied, "It helps me think." Her answer seemed innocent, yet something about it felt unsettling. Then, one quiet night, everything changed. A young boy from the village disappeared without a trace. At first, people believed he had wandered off and would return by morning. But he didn't. Days passed, and fear slowly began to creep into Blackridge. Not long after, a farmer went missing. Then a traveling salesman vanished on the same road near the woods. 3 people gone. And for the first time, the villagers began to feel that something was terribly wrong. Still, no one looked at Mary Ann. Not yet. The peaceful rhythm of Blackridge was gone. In its place, there was fear. People who once left their doors open now locked them tightly. Children were no longer allowed to wander outside alone. Even the busiest parts of the village felt strangely quiet, as if everyone was waiting for something terrible to happen next. The 3 disappearances had shaken everyone. Search parties were formed almost every day. Groups of villagers carried lanterns and walked deep into the woods, calling out names, hoping for any sign of the missing people. But the forest remained silent, as if it was hiding something. Days turned into weeks, and then, finally, a clue appeared. One early morning, a local hunter ventured deeper into the woods than usual. As he walked through the thick trees, something caught his eye near a patch of disturbed soil. It was a shoe, old, worn, and partially covered in dirt. When he brought it back to the village, the truth became clear. It belonged to the missing traveling salesman. The discovery sent shockwaves through Blackridge. For the first time, the woods were no longer just a place of mystery. They were a place of fear. Soon, whispers began to spread. People started recalling things they had ignored before. Small details that once seemed unimportant now felt deeply unsettling. Mary Ann walking alone at dusk, returning late at night with mud on her dress, the faint metallic smell that sometimes followed her. Individually, these things meant nothing, but together they painted a troubling picture. The local constable decided it was time to act. He visited Mary Ann at her cottage and asked her about her nightly walks. She stood calmly in the doorway, her expression unchanged. "It's peaceful there," she said softly. "I like being alone." Her voice was steady, too steady. And as the constable left, He couldn't shake the feeling that something about Mary Ann Ansell wasn't as simple as it seemed. The discovery of the shoe changed everything. What was once a quiet investigation quickly turned into something far more serious. The woods were no longer just being searched, they were being examined with urgency and fear. This time, the constable brought more men, along with proper tools. They weren't just looking anymore, they were digging. The area where the shoe had been found became the center of attention. The soil there looked disturbed, softer than the ground around it. At first, no one spoke. There was a heavy silence in the air, as if everyone already knew what they were about to uncover. Then a shovel hit something. Not a rock, something else. Moments later, the truth emerged. A body, carefully buried, wrapped in cloth, hidden just beneath the surface. The men stepped back in shock, but there was no time to process it. As they continued digging, they found another grave, and then another. 3 bodies in total. All of them were the missing villagers. The news spread through Blackridge like wildfire. Fear turned into horror, and horror into anger. How could something like this happen in their peaceful village? There was only one person who could be connected to the woods so closely: Mary Ann Ansell. She was arrested that same evening, but what truly unsettled everyone was not the discovery, it was her reaction. She didn't resist, she didn't panic, she didn't even ask why she was being taken. Instead, she quietly looked at the officers and said something that sent a chill down their spines. "You weren't supposed to find them so soon." During the interrogation, Mary Ann confessed, but her explanation made no sense. She claimed the victims were tired and asked her for peace. She said she was helping them, freeing them from something they could not escape. The officers assumed it was madness, until she leaned forward slightly and whispered, "There are more." And in that moment, everyone in the room realized this nightmare was far from over. After Mary Ann's chilling confession, the investigation took a darker turn. It was no longer just about what she had done. It was about why. The authorities began digging into her past, hoping to find answers that could explain the horrors uncovered in the woods. What they found was deeply disturbing. Mary Ann had lived a life of silence long before the crimes began. Her mother had died when she was very young, leaving her alone with a father who was distant and cold. He rarely spoke to her, and when he did, it was often harsh and emotionless. Neighbors later described Mary Ann as a lonely child who kept to herself, avoiding other children and spending most of her time alone. But there was something else. Several villagers remembered seeing her whispering to herself, as if she were having conversations with someone who wasn't there. At the time, they dismissed it as childish imagination. Now it felt like a warning they had ignored. When police searched her cottage, they found a small worn journal hidden beneath her bed. Inside were pages filled with neat, careful handwriting. At first glance, the entries seemed ordinary, but the deeper they read, the more disturbing it became. Mary Ann wrote about voices, voices that spoke to her at night, voices that guided her and told her who was ready. Each victim's name appeared in the journal long before they disappeared. Next to each name were strange notes describing their sadness, their struggles, and their supposed desire to escape. But the most terrifying discovery was yet to come. Some names in the journal belonged to people who were still alive, friends, neighbors, ordinary villagers. The police quickly realized something horrifying. Mary Ann hadn't finished. Her actions weren't random, they were planned,
almost organized, as if she believed she was following a purpose. And now, even behind bars, there was one question no one could answer. If the voices were still speaking to her, who would they choose next?
Mary Ann Ansell was declared mentally unstable after weeks of evaluation. Doctors believed she was suffering from severe psychological delusions. The voices she described were labeled as hallucinations, and her actions were seen as the result of a deeply disturbed mind. With no clear understanding of her condition, she was transferred to a high-security asylum far from Blackridge. The village slowly began to recover. People returned to their routines, though nothing ever felt the same again. The woods were avoided, the laughter of children seemed quieter, and the memory of what had happened lingered in every corner. For a while, it seemed like the nightmare was finally over, until something unexplainable happened. One night, a nurse working in the asylum disappeared. She had been on duty during the late shift, assigned to monitor the most dangerous patients, including Mary Ann. According to official reports, the nurse was last seen entering the corridor leading to Mary Ann's room. But she never came back. The alarm was raised immediately. Guards searched every room, every hallway, every locked door. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken locks, no open windows. Nothing. Security footage only made things more confusing. At the exact time of the disappearance, Mary Ann was seen sitting alone in her room, calm, still, not moving at all. It was impossible, and yet the nurse was gone. Days later, during a routine inspection of Mary Ann's room, something chilling was discovered. A new journal entry, written neatly just like before. She was tired. She wanted peace, too. The staff were terrified. How could this happen inside a secure facility? Was Mary Ann somehow responsible, or was something else at work? No answers were ever found. To this day, Mary Ann Ansell remains locked away, sitting quietly in her room, her soft smile unchanged. And sometimes, late at night, the staff claim they can hear her whispering, as if she's still listening to the voices, waiting for the next name. If this story kept you on edge until the very last moment, don't stop here. Subscribe for more dark true crime documentaries that uncover the most chilling mysteries hidden in the shadows. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next case, because some stories are far from over. And tell us in the comments, do you think Mary Ann was truly guilty, or was something else controlling the truth? Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next investigation.